June 6 is D-Day, the 59th anniversary of the largest amphibious invasion in the history of warfare. Over 156,000 troops were deployed on the first day of the invasion. Many of those troops were West Virginians. They were extraordinary men doing extraordinary things. In 1994, we videotaped some of these West Virginians while they told of their experiences on D-Day. We hope you enjoy this edition of Looking Back on the West Virginia Library Commission's Library Television Network.
And we were preparing for it. We had just came from Italy, an invasion of Sicily and an invasion of Italy, in which we occupied Naples. Then we sailed to North Ireland to get ready for the invasion of Normandy. We had set up, or the Army had set up, decoys all along the coast near Dunkirk, and to mislead the Germans into believing that we were going to enter the invasion would be there. They knew this invasion had come off, or an attempt at an invasion at least, and were trying to be prepared for it. So Hitler himself believed it was going to be at Dunkirk. So we went to North Ireland, took about a winter's rest and recreation, came through Scotland and England and started preparing for a flight into Normandy. And the first night of the invasion was supposed to have been June the 5th, but due to a storm that rose in the channel, we were unable to risk a flight at that time of airborne into France. But on the night, near midnight, June the 6th, the 82nd was ordered to fly into Normandy with paratroops and gliders and land near St. Mary-le-Glisse and take over as much of the highways and railroads and things leading into Normandy as possible. We landed in Normandy in total darkness. 2 o'clock British double daylight time, which would have been on standard time 12 o'clock. And my glider and many others, most of them were crash landings. There were no good landings. They were all crash landings because we were landing in total darkness. Fortunately, I took 2 wings off of my glider when I struck a telephone pole and then a tree afterwards. Fortunately, there was none of my men seriously hurt. Some other than the bruises and the scratches, there was very little injury to my crew. In my glider, I had a howitzer, 75-pack howitzer, and a Jeep to pull it with, and a good supply of ammunition, including my squad. This howitzer that I had was a total surprise to the Germans. They didn't expect that kind of firepower from an airborne outfit that had never been used that way before. But we landed, all got out of our gliders and took positions around the glider and checked the men to see how they were getting along. then we found that the glider was supposed to open up and let our equipment go out. We had to chop our equipment out of the glider before we could get it unloaded. After that, we found that there was a road passed by us, and we knew almost that that was a road that led to our bivouac area, but we didn't know which direction to go, whether to go north or go south. So we decided to go the wrong direction, naturally. Got a little ways down the road, found another glider. It was wrecked too, and it had lost its ramp, had one of its ramps bent so it couldn't unload its equipment. And I knew another glider had landed just across the way, across the field on the other side that had good ramps. So I asked who would go with me. It took 2 men to carry the ramp, one on each end. Who would go with me after that ramp? And my buddy woke up and said, yes, somebody. So we ran across that field. It looked like a snowstorm with the tracer bullets flying across the field. Sometimes they come close enough to you'd feel the heat off the tracers. Going into battle, the main landing was the thing that worried me the most, because we couldn't see where we were going to land, and we knew it had to be a crash landing. It might be houses, trees, or anything of that sort. But after the landing, I've had many people to ask me if we were scared. I can't label it as scared. I don't know. We knew there was extreme danger, that death was on every hand, but we had a job to do, and we planned to do it regardless. We must know too, that we were already seasoned troops. We'd been through North Africa, Sicily, and the invasion of Sicily, and the invasion of Italy, and we were seasoned troops. Battle was no stranger to us, but we knew that we had to do our job. We all had been briefed by General Eisenhower, and we knew what we were supposed to do, and we were determined to do it, regardless. But as far as being afraid, the thing that was on my mind was winning the battle and securing the positions that we had been told to secure for the landings on the coast landings when they broke through to our lines. And it's just a job to do, just like you're trained to do any job. Now, we were thoroughly trained troops, and we had guerrilla-type training, much of it, and we were well ready for guerrilla warfare. Matter of fact, when I look back at it, I think that the airborne was guerrilla troops in division force. But the only difference are guerrillas and guerrilla warfare, they got in and done what they were going to do and got out. But we went in to stay till somebody got to us. And that's what we did. But that was my thinking. It was winning the battle, was doing the thing that's the best things to win. And saving as many men, too. I wanted to save my men all that I could.
The most powerful invasion air force ever launched. Some of the 11,000 planes that opened the path through the so-called impregnable Atlantic Wall. Between Le Havre and Cherbourg in Normandy, the Allied lightning strikes. Backing up the mightiest invasion by air, 4,000 ships, combat and landing craft carry the war to the enemy by sea. The Coast Guard, the Navy, the Air Forces land hundreds of thousands of British, Canadians, and Yanks on Hitler's doorstep within a few days. Isolating Cherbourg with its strategic harbor is the immediate objective. Landings are made under a naval barrage. President Roosevelt said, "Let our hearts be stout." And later, Germany is the first on the list for destruction. These troops, bucking the choppy seas in the Channel, heeded his words. While landings were successful, we were not without our losses. Each hour, and the enemy's hedgehog defenses are ahead. This is the supreme moment of invasion. This is frontal assault on an entrenched enemy.
There's a whole lot of things to think about. It was something that we had never done before in combat. We'd trained for months and months in the gliders, but when you do something like that, you don't know what's going to happen on the other end. But what you're really thinking about when you enter that glider and you know you're going to leave the ground and you're going into combat somewhere where we'd never been. So that, of course, you know, I imagine we're all doing a little bit of praying, I'm sure. And but early in the morning, we was stationed down in this marshalling area, and early in the morning we loaded in these gliders, and I was a Jeep driver, so I had a Jeep in my glider, and what I trained how to load that thing and how to unload it and everything, and so we got all loaded up, I guess, the night before, and we taken off there, and so it was a sight to be seen across the channel, because we had the water was full of ships, and on top of that there were fighter planes between us and the water, so they had us very well covered, but we did get some flak. We were flying about 900 feet high, and that was to get out of the way of the anti-aircraft guns. They couldn't fire them, couldn't burst their shells that low down, and it was about out of the range of small arms fire. So, but I did hear a lot of bullets going through our glider. So, and we flew right over the German defense pillboxes, and of course the men were unloading off of ships down on the beachhead. I could see it all, and so we flew in 15 miles inland, and we had been showing pictures for a week before. We stayed in this marshalling area about a week, I think, and every day we would see a picture of our landing area and see what was going on. And of course the Germans were well aware that we were coming airborne. And Normandy was full of hedgerows. And in those hedgerows there were large trees once in a while. And they were cutting off these trees at the top of the hedge and moving them out in the middle of the fields. So we picked that up on our pictures that we get from over there. And so we had two pilots in this flight, a pilot and a co-pilot. And so many of them got injured and or killed. They cut these trees off in these hedgerows, well, and they couldn't see them. There's just a stump there. So the gliders, hedgerow is a good thing to check the speed of a glider, but if there's a tree cut off in it, why, it's too bad. So that's what happened to a lot of the pilots. And thereafter, we had one more flight later on, and they only used one pilot and no co-pilot because of that way. So we went in to liberate Saint Mary-Église, France. That was the first city that was liberated, and the 82nd Airborne Division got the credit for that. So we had our landing area picked out. The area we were supposed to land in has a big crossroad. So when we got inside of that, we could see it. Right there it was, as plain as anything. So we flew out over that, and a C-47 airplane was what was pulling our glider. So they had a hitch. We had a tow line, what they call a tow line. We could either unlatch it or they could do it. So when they got over the area where they wanted to let it go, they gave us a green light. So we unhooked so the tow line would stay with them. And we had 4 Jeeps, I believe, in our battalion. And by 10 o'clock, we were all together. Everybody had assembled. Our thoughts were very, very serious thoughts, because when we stepped in that glider, we didn't know where or what was going to happen, but we knew we were going somewhere that we'd never been. And I sure know that I was praying about it, and I have an idea that fellows probably did a little praying that never had before. So, and my thoughts were getting it over with and getting back home. And of course, I went on through the whole war, 4 different areas we were in, missions. We had 4 different missions. So, and I had a slight injury. I ran over a tank line with this Jeep, and of course, we didn't use it anymore. And I drove up to this CP. I was hauling small arms ammunition, and I had a supply sergeant in the seat beside me, and a private was in the back seat. And when we went by the company CP, the captain was there, and I knew him, and he was a real nice guy. And we had an extra lieutenant named Short, and he was there at the CP, and he hopped up on the back of that Jeep, and we didn't go 100 yards till we hit this mine, and it killed him. And I never did see my supply sergeant anymore, and it didn't hurt me much, but it hurt me some, more than I knew about then. So that was a close call that I got.
During the landings, the merciless pounding of the entire invasion area continues. Here is real pinpoint bombing. One of the last bridges between the invasion post and Paris gets it. When the beachhead is established, heavier equipment is moved in. Reinforcements for those heroes who are bringing liberation to the people of Europe. The cost of our initial landing was but a fraction of what our leaders expected. More than 10,000 German prisoners were captured in the first few days of the battle. And we know one Hun who's not going to peddle any more Nazi philosophy. The Allied advance is rapid as we mop up town after town. Some Yank will have a nice doormat when he gets back home. The Supreme Commander, General Eisenhower, holds an early conference with General Montgomery, the commander of English ground troops, and they see that all operations go according to plan. These are the men who will lead us to victory, along with General Omar Bradley with glasses, who commands our infantry. The cost of our first landing was low, but many wounded are returned to English ports, men injured in that first assault. Let these pictures remind us that there's still a long road ahead to Berlin. The bond you buy in this 5th War Loan Drive can help men like these on the path to victory. Now it's your turn. Buy that extra bond today.
Sunday was bad. It was very heavy seas. A lot of landing craft were in trouble. I was taking on water most of the time. An engine would go out. My motor max had to purge the diesel fuel, the water out of the diesel fuel tanks because I was taking seawater in there. And I had trouble making headway, but I kept going. And Sunday night, we were ordered to drop the anchor in Weymouth Bay, which was behind Portland Bill in the English Channel on the southwest coast of England. So we put in there. I dropped the anchor about midnight, and I'd go down below for coffee, and a lot of landing craft were in there. And by the way, going into Weymouth Bay, as I recall, the weather was not only bad, the seas were rough, but it was raining and sleeting. And this was the night of June the 4th, sleet and rain. But anyway, we dropped anchor, and every once in a while I'd go up topside and look around. There were these shadows of these landing craft anchored there. About 3 a.m. I got up and walked around topside, and there wasn't anything around. I thought, my God, I'm going to be late. They've taken off. I didn't receive any orders. So we pulled up the hook, and I studied my charts because I knew we were to eventually rendezvous at a point called Point Z out in the channel about 10, 15 miles out. So we made headway out there and reached what I thought was Point Z, and there was nobody around. We looked around. Off in the horizon was a PC blinking at me. He said, "What the heck are you doing out there?" He said, "You're in the middle of mine waters. Get the heck back to spot there and off the British coast." So we turned around, went back, finally found the column that consisted of landing craft in my part of the task of the Utah Beach Task Force. They hadn't even left the shores of England yet, so we got in line. This was Monday. All day Monday, the weather was rough. Then Monday evening, June the 5th, we approached the transport area, which area is the area where landing craft form up. That's where the task force commander's ship is anchored, 11.5 miles off the beach. And I reached that point about 10 p.m. as I recall. Very dark. Precisely at midnight, the bombardment opened up on the beach, and it was a fantastic display. And we sat there getting ready to go in because I was scheduled to go in on the 13th wave, one of the first 2 LCTs to go in with our beach marking equipment and explosives. And as dawn broke, I tried to start up my engines. All 3 engines were out. See, they'd been taken on seawater. And I made a remark that I shouldn't have made. I said, "It sounds awfully funny to me." And I just assumed something that deliberately happened. But I went down below in the engine room. The motor max were down there purging seawater out of the diesel fuel tanks and so forth. And to make a long story short, we blinked over the bay field. And meanwhile, I was in bad shape, taking on water, didn't have a bilge pump. And I said, "We are in a sinking condition. We must beach." And he said, "Stand by." Blinked back. This went on for about 2 hours. Finally, they ordered me to pull along a seagoing tug and to try to unload some of our things we had loaded on there. But I blinked over again and I said, "I've got to get out of here." And they said, "Stand by." So finally I told the crew, I said, "We're going in. I'm not going to sit out here in the transport area." And this was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, as I recall. So we had beach marking equipment, we had explosives. They were on wooden sleds that were to be pulled off with 2 small bulldozer-type vehicles. And we had a lot of engineer Army personnel, so I got them all off except maybe 2 fellows who were to operate these 2 bulldozers in case we got in there, and of course plus my crew. So we headed in. One engine would go out, the other one would go out. We were doing like 3.5, 4 knots. Now an LCT only does 6, 7 knots under the best conditions. We got about halfway in, and I noticed off the port side a valve, an LCT sticking on the orders was a 777. Now before the invasion, we thought, boy, that's really a lucky ship. And here, it had hit either an acoustic or a magnetic mines, which were troublesome. That's the thing about Utah Beach. Most of the danger was from mines. And we kept going, and an engine would go out. To make a long story short, we got in within a few hundred yards of the beach. My engines went out. My exec 3 times told me we were sinking. I didn't want to hear it. And finally, around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, it was starting to get a little dark. It was dusk. Meanwhile, we could see the gliders going in and certain things like that. The firing was very, very scattered. There was very little resistance on the beach at that time. Occasionally there'd be a splash from the heavy artillery farther up the beach. Now, one thing about the landings on Utah Beach is that we landed too far to the left. This was due to the heavy tides and the fact that the PC that took us in went too far to the left. It turned out to be a blessing for the reason that we were 1,500 yards left of where we were supposed to beach, and this was an area that wasn't mined as heavily, had fewer gun emplacements, and as a result, it was less dangerous. I guess I can best describe it that when you saw that heavy bombardment, the thing that struck me was that Mommy isn't around, Daddy isn't around, nobody's around. I think anybody's had any kind of experience like this will say that you're just nobody. You're a number. Everybody out there is equal. You're not special at all. And you just have to live with that idea and go on from there. The idea that there's nothing special about you, that everybody's equal, and whether you're a rear admiral or whether you're an infantryman carrying a rifle, it's kind of a fatalistic feeling that you get, not to mention the feeling in your stomach and so forth. I think that's a typical feeling. I know I felt that I was just nobody of any value, not of any value, but I was really a very small part of a large operation.